Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith. I'll be conducting our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Taking a live look right now out at Space Launch Complex 40, otherwise known as Slick 40. And a Falcon 9 rocket at the heart of it, getting ready to launch what SpaceX calls the Starlink 12-1 mission. On board a batch of 23 Starlink satellites, notable for a number of reasons, one of which is these satellites going to the 43rd inclination, 43 degrees inclination. But also on board are 12 satellites that feature direct-to-cell capabilities. This would be the first time SpaceX launches those DTC Starlinks to a 43 degrees inclination, so a bit of an expansion from what we've seen them launch up to the present. A member of SpaceX leadership in the satellite engineering department noted that they were closing in on the completion of their first shell of direct-to-cell Starlinks. However, given that this is the first that is heading to a 43 degrees inclination and all the other Starlink direct-to-cell satellites have headed to a 53 degree inclination, it's unclear if SpaceX will complete its first shell with this launch or if it will need one more batch to head to the 53 degree inclination. Time will tell, and of course we'll keep you posted as we learn more from SpaceX. But for now, we'll continue to talk about this mission as it unfolds. Appreciate the few hundred of you who are joining with us live as we're kicking things off. I know it is a blisteringly early hour for us here in the United States, but hopefully a more comfortable hour for our friends joining around the world. So appreciate all of the more than 550 of you who are up and at 'em at this point of the day. If you haven't already, if you could do us a favor and click that like button, allows more folks to find their way into our live launch coverage as we get underway here. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of the broadcast today. Our photographer, Adam Bernstein, is preparing to track the Falcon 9 rocket once it leaves the pad. Our photographer, Michael Kane, has this morning off. If you'd like to follow our photographers, you can find their work over on X, previously known as Twitter. Adam is at ABurnNYC. Michael is at MD Kane Jr. While you're there, you can find Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now. We are also on Threads, Facebook, and most recently, we have joined the Blue Sky community. So you can pop on over and find us on Blue Sky as well. Just a quick point of note on the Blue Sky front, there is another page that is basically posting all the articles that go up on our website. That is not us properly. You'll want to look for the Spaceflight Now that has our logo that you see here on YouTube. We'll also be joined with tracking views this morning by our friends Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions, as well as Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images. Want to thank our moderators for helping us out with the stream today. Our thanks to Aussie Space Girl and Callistia Lee for popping in the stream this morning. Appreciate the both of you. If you do see any of the other mods join on in, be sure to give them a big ol' hello. We're supported here on YouTube by a wonderful channel member community that make live launch opportunities like this possible. So thanks to folks like T. McGee, Sulfur for Lunch, Patty Chichil, Pamelot70, Cumulus Granatus, BC Stargazer, Zen, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff opportunities in 4K. Also, channel membership affords you access to our Discord community, so we'd love to see you over there. Hear some of your thoughts about our coverage and ways that we can improve further down the road. In that spirit, I want to welcome Sir Jeffrey Claude, joining us with channel membership at the Pad Leader level. Welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. And our thanks to T. McGee, marking 5 months as a channel member with us at the Pad Leader level. Appreciate that. Thanks for sticking around with us. Last bit of housekeeping. If you have a comment or question about this mission, or would just like to offer a little bit of support this morning, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature, as Mr. Frank Skurlock did, getting us started off on a good footing here with the $2 Super Chat. Not only will your comments and questions offer us some interesting things to talk about as we continue on through the count, but at the same time, you'll be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now and our ongoing effort to improve our coverage capabilities and bring you the best in live spaceflight coverage here on YouTube. With all that out of the way, we are currently T-minus 52 minutes, 38 seconds, and counting. This morning's launch of Starlink satellites marks the 80th dedicated launch of SpaceX's V2 mini satellites this year. This will also be the 143rd launch of Starlink V2 minis to date. Time we're counting down to right now is a liftoff of 4:35 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. For those joining around the world, that's 09:35 UTC. SpaceX is running its countdown from the Hangar X site here at the Kennedy Space Center. They also have support from their headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Too dark to see the sky, really, but the 45th Weather Squadron forecast a pretty pristine outlook for this mission. Greater than 95% chance of favorable weather at liftoff, and no watch items of concern today. No cumulus clouds, no liftoff winds, none of it. So from a weather standpoint, there should be no impediment to launch today. Taking a look from our turn basin camera here, you can just see the crescent moon as it's been rising this morning. It's been a very lovely moonrise driving up into the Kennedy Space Center this morning. Just almost out of frame here, but you can see it right at the top of your screen. Beautifully illuminating Florida's Space Coast as we're now just about 50 minutes away from seeing the Falcon 9 launch. Those little lights down there at the bottom of your screen at the moment. As SpaceX is pressing towards its current T0 liftoff time of 4:35 a.m., as long as they have not begun fueling, they do have backup launch opportunities within this window that lasts until 8:14 this morning. And again, that's as long as SpaceX has not begun fueling. Once tanking starts, they are committing themselves to a launch attempt at that point. Since SpaceX uses a load and go style of fueling, they are tanking the rocket basically right up to the point where they are ready to launch. What that means is if they start tanking and for whatever reason there's a technical issue, SpaceX is not able to hold, that would result in a scrub and a 24-hour turnaround opportunity for this rocket. That backup begins Tuesday, November 26th at 4:26 a.m., about 9 minutes earlier than today's earliest launch opportunity. All indications right now, though, are that SpaceX is pressing towards an on-time departure of this Falcon 9 rocket. Notable, not only for the payload on board, which we talked about just a little bit earlier, but also because that booster that you see there at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket, it's tail number 1080. And you may be thinking, well, didn't we just see booster 1080 launched not that long ago? And you would not be incorrect in that memory. We did just see 1080 very, very recently. In fact, it just launched on November 11th. And with a just shy of 14-day turnaround, this would be the fastest turnaround for SpaceX with a first stage booster in company history. And that's not just if it launches right at the beginning of the window. No, as a matter of fact, it'll be the fastest turnaround for a booster if it launches today or tomorrow or the day after that or the day after that or the day after that. We've got a week before they're pressing towards the next record. So quite an accomplishment for SpaceX if they're able to pull this off today, and an example of how quickly they want to turn around these boosters and move spaceflight towards more of an airline type business model as far as frequency and normality. Still quite a ways before the industry fully shifts to that type of thinking, though. We'll continue to cover the progress all along the way. Currently T-minus 46 minutes, 53 seconds and counting. Speaking of counting, let's go ahead and talk about the countdown timeline for this Falcon 9 flight as we're pressing towards that liftoff again at 4:35 a.m. Eastern, 09:35 UTC. If the SpaceX launch team feels like they're in a good position to do so, they can go ahead and take the poll approving the start of fueling a little bit early, but nominally it happens at T-minus 38 minutes. It's when that thumbs up gets given to step into the fueling process. Tanking begins at T-minus 35 minutes with a loading of RP1 or a rocket-grade kerosene on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages, and liquid oxygen starts flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 30 minutes, cryogenic helium starts being loaded on board the pressure vessels in the Falcon 9's first stage. The helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same is true on the second stage, about 4 or so minutes thereafter. T-minus 23 minutes, loading of second stage kerosene concludes. Then T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the strong back chill down process gets underway. We see that manifest as the so-called big vent at about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. This is when SpaceX is thermally conditioning the feed lines at the pad in preparation for second stage liquid oxygen load. That venting takes place until about T-minus 16 minutes and 30 seconds, which point we see it taper off in preparation for second stage LOX load to get underway at about T-minus 16 minutes. Speaking of chillin', the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines begins at T-minus 7 minutes. That process involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, hoping to protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes out, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract begin. It starts with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, And then the transport erector, or the strong back, will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. It stays in that position until liftoff, at which point it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes out, the first stage liquid oxygen tank should be full. Same is true on the second stage about a minute thereafter, at which point the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup, that means controlled countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch 45 seconds out. The engine ignition command will be issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 engines are healthy and ignite, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. Coming up again at 4:35 a.m. Eastern, 09:35 UTC, T-minus 43 minutes and 30 seconds. We're now at T-minus 40 minutes, 53 seconds and counting. A little less than 3 minutes away now from the nominal point at which the SpaceX launch director will make the call on the start of prop load today. SpaceX continues to rack up the number of launches so far on the year. Here's a look at where they currently stand with their Falcon family of vehicles. 117 so far as of their latest launch, which lifted off from Vandenberg Space Force Base. It's actually on the 24th. Total of 117 Falcon rockets so far, 115 Falcon 9s, and 2 Falcon Heavy missions to date. As we're coming upon the point of the start of prop load, let's go ahead and talk about where this Falcon 9 rocket is going to fly once it leaves the pad. Let's talk a little trajectory, shall we? taking a look at a Google Earth view of Space Launch Complex 40, otherwise known as Slick 40, there at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. This is the first mission to the Group 12 part of the Starlink constellation, heading to a 43-degree inclination, which means that this is going to be flying in a southeasterly trajectory once it leaves the pad. Falcon 9 first stage booster, tail number 1080, set to follow that red arc that you see there on your screen and land on one of SpaceX's 3 drone ships. They have 2 stationed here on the East Coast. The one on deck today is called Just Read the Instructions. With a successful booster landing, that will mark the 99th successful booster touchdown on Just Read the Instructions and the 374th booster landing for SpaceX to date. The company, of course, caring not only about the recovery of their first stage boosters, but also their payload fairings, since they save about $6 million per recovery effort. So it's an important part of SpaceX's business model to try and recover these payload fairings whenever possible and turn them around for future flights. SpaceX is working to certify both its first stage boosters and its payload fairings for up to 40 missions, and so far, as confirmed by one of their most recent launches back on the 21st, they do have a new flight leader as far as payload fairings are concerned, with one standing at 21 missions completed. On the booster side, the magic number is 23. That distinction belonging to booster B-1067, which has 23 launches and landings to its name. Here's a look at the final part of the recovery process as SpaceX brought aboard one half of the payload fairing. You see or attach that crane there from a previous Falcon 9 mission. Taking a look at the countdown clock, T-minus 36 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. At this point, SpaceX will have made a decision on the start of prop load for this launch today. Assuming the go-ahead was given, we're now less than 2 minutes from the start of fueling. Indications continue to suggest that we are on track for liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket at 4:35 a.m. Eastern, 09:35 UTC. So we should see some signs of fueling, if not direct word from SpaceX that prop load has begun here in the next couple of minutes. Once fueling gets underway in about 20 seconds, what we're going to be looking for, barring word from SpaceX, is if you look at the Falcon 9 rocket there in the center of your screen, you see near the base of the booster, it's a little hard to make out, but you can just barely make out the lettering of SpaceX. Just beneath the X in SpaceX, you can see a little bit of a lighter gradient horizontal stripe there. It's about at that point where we start to see a frost line form as the super cold densified liquid oxygen starts flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. You should also see a little bit of vapor there as well. While it is a bit brisk for Florida standards here this morning. Appreciate the push in there, Steven, with our upgraded tracking camera. Densified liquid oxygen still considerably colder than here in Florida, so we'll see a little bit of vapor form in that area as well when tanking gets underway, which we should actually be about a minute into fueling. We usually start to see some definitive signs of tanking by about the T-minus 33 or 32 minute mark. And we do have an update to the T0. SpaceX has not begun fueling. And they're now targeting a new T0 of 5:02 a.m. Eastern. 5:02 a.m. Eastern for the launch of this batch of 23 Starlink satellites. We are adjusting our countdown clock. Stand by. For those just now joining us, you're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the Starlink 12-1 mission from SpaceX. As we were on the cusp of what seemed like the start of fueling, instead SpaceX pushed back the teaser liftoff time, now targeting about 30 minutes after the original T0. So looking at a liftoff, if it holds, of 5:02 a.m. Eastern, now 10:02 UTC. As we stated previously, SpaceX does have additional launch opportunities in this window as long as they have not begun fueling. That lasts until 8:14 a.m. Eastern this morning. As we're waiting, we are getting some spectacular views of the aforementioned moon this morning from our friend P. Carson's with Max Q Productions. Just an incredible look at our own little satellite here for Earth. It's a great detail of this crescent moon. Of course, the moon is going to be a hotspot in 2025 as we have a couple of CLIPS missions heading to the moon's south pole. We have Intuitive Machines' IM-2 mission that's heading to the lunar south pole. Another mission heading to the moon is first lander that is moon-bound from Firefly Aerospace. Their Blue Ghost lunar lander. Reason for that name, Blue Ghost. It's a type of firefly. Those missions looking for flight to the moon in early 2025. We're now currently T-minus 50 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Again, for those who may just be stepping into the broadcast coverage, SpaceX has pushed back the T0 liftoff time of its Falcon 9 rocket supporting the Starlink 12-1 mission. 23 Starlink satellites on board, 12 featuring direct-to-sail capabilities, now looking at a liftoff at 5:02 a.m. Eastern, with backup opportunities that extend to 8:14 a.m. as long as SpaceX has not begun fueling its Falcon 9 rocket. We're now about 11 minutes away from the point at which the SpaceX launch director would make the call on the start of prop load, assuming that another shift in T0 is not needed. Taking a look at our live chat here, I want to thank channel member and moderator Callistia Lee for a $10 super chat. Appreciate that, Callistia. Little tongue-in-cheek saying, my fine for being late this morning. We appreciate whatever you're able to pop in. Also want to thank channel member Jeff Groves for being with us for a full year now, 12 months at the Pad Leader level, saying, hey, I'm up to a full year of support. Really appreciate that, Jeff. And thanks for your ongoing support of what we do here at Spaceflight now. Say with every stream, because it's true, that the enduring support of our channel member community allows us to do what we do here at Spaceflight now. So very appreciative to all those who are able to be and choose to be channel members here at Spaceflight now. Allows us to do these live launch broadcasts as well as continue to make some upgrades behind the scenes that strive towards the mission of making these broadcasts more robust and increase the capabilities of what we can cover and how we can cover it. Since there's been an adjustment to the T0, we'll go ahead and show the trajectory map again, but we'll save that for a little bit closer to the T0. Want to confirm that we are in fueling and allows more folks to find their way into our live launch coverage. Now currently T minus 38 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. We are once again on the point, or at the point at which SpaceX should be making a call on the start of prop load for this mission. Happens at roughly T minus 38 minutes, with fueling set to begin at T minus 35 minutes. SpaceX is getting ready to launch its 401st Falcon 9 rocket to date. Let's go ahead and talk about the workhorse vehicle. It's standing 70 meters or 229 feet tall, has diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Majority of that is made up by the Falcon 9's first stage. This booster has flown 12 times before, going for flight number 13, tail number 1080 in the SpaceX fleet. At the base of the first stage are 9 Merlin engines, which burn a rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs that are used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Today, SpaceX is set to use the drone ship called Just Read the Instructions. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core surrounded by carbon fiber. On the inner stage are deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere, tail first like a big old dart heading towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage and a first stage main engine cutoff. High pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure clean separation. Second stage engine nozzle is also housed safely inside the interstage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage, the Falcon 9, powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVac engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust, and it will be fired twice on today's flight, placing the 23 Starlink satellites into their intended orbit. The MVac engine burns the same prop mix, that being kerosene and liquid oxygen, same as the first stage. Following deployment of the Starlink satellites, it will ignite for a third time to perform a deorbit burn, driving the upper stage back into the atmosphere, where it will burn up and eliminate the risk of any unnecessary space debris on this mission. Finally, at the top of the stack are the payload fairings, which currently contain the 23 Starlink satellites. The fairings are made up of a carbon composite material standing 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall and are 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. 2 halves of the payload fairings will be recovered a little further downrange from where the first stage lands on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. They splash down under the support parachutes and will be brought back into Cape Canaveral, turned over for refurbishment, and prepared for a future flight. Now currently T minus 35 minutes, 7 seconds and counting. Assuming SpaceX is at this point ready to proceed into tanking, fueling set to begin right now. We've reached this point once before, so we will, of course, watch for signs of fueling or await word from SpaceX that fueling has in fact begun. Again, with the start of fueling presumably underway. We're looking at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket just beneath the X in the SpaceX lettering, where you see that horizontal, slightly lighter gray band around the first stage booster above the landing legs, which you can see the top of there. It's fairly clear night as far as the weather concerned. Still getting some heat distortion here from our perspective at the Kennedy Space Center press site. But fortunately, the trees are basically all asleep and not blocking any part of the Falcon 9 rocket, which gives us a nice vantage point tonight. In the next minute or so, we should really start to see evidence of fueling as liquid oxygen starts flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. Again, assuming that prop load is underway right now. Should see a little vapor in that area of the rocket in addition to the frost line forming. Now T-minus 30 minutes, 47 seconds and counting. It does appear as though SpaceX is now tanking its Falcon 9 rocket, as we're beginning to see our first signs of a frost line forming at the base of the Falcon 9 first stage booster. And with the fueling of the rocket, that means SpaceX is locking in its T0 time of 5:02 a.m. Eastern, 10:02 UTC for our friends joining around the world. with fueling now underway on the Falcon 9 rocket. What we're looking for next is start of the chill of the feed lines on the prior to second stage liquid oxygen load. That gets underway at about T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds. Setting up for second stage LOX load, T-minus 16 minutes. Also should point out about a little more than 2 minutes ago, SpaceX began loading cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage, which will be used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. That helium will be loaded on board the second stage at about T-minus 26 minutes. It's about a minute and a half from now they'll start that process. Taking a look at our live chat here, I want to thank the more than 2,500 of you who are joining with us live this morning. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us, allow some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. You could also share the stream, which will help for those around the world be able to find this live launch coverage as they're at whatever point in the day that y'all are at, depending on where in the world you're joining from. As we're looking towards a potentially record-breaking turnaround for this Falcon 9 first stage booster B1080 in the SpaceX fleet, let's go ahead and take a quick trip down memory lane, talk about the missions it has previously flown before it goes ahead and flies launch number 13. This booster began its career with a mission to the International Space Station with a liftoff of the Axiom 2 quartet of private astronauts. This mission was commanded by former NASA astronaut, current Axiom Space astronaut, Peggy Whitson. She was joined by fellow American John Schaffner in the pilot seat and 2 mission specialists from Saudi Arabia. Peggy Whitson currently training with a new crew to fly on board the AX-4 mission, set to lift off early next year. Next launch for this booster came on July 1st. That was Euclid launching on behalf of the European Space Agency. Going to come back to this in just a second, just correcting a quick technical glitch. Euclid was still is very much in operation. It's a wide-angle space telescope designed to better understand things like dark matter and dark energy. Flights 3 and 4 for this booster were Starlink missions. Those were Starlink 6-11 on August 27th and 6-24 on October 22nd. Flight number 5, another Dragon mission, this time Crew Dragon Freedom supporting the AX-3 mission. Former NASA astronaut and current Axiom Space astronaut Michael Lopez Alegria was the commander of this flight, lifting off on January 18th, 2024. Michael A. became the first person to fly twice on board a Dragon capsule. Jared Isaacman became the second, commanding both Inspiration 4 and Polaris Dawn. And Peggy Whitson will become the third as she commands the AX-4 mission next year. Launch number 6 for this booster came on March 21st, launching a Cargo Dragon spacecraft up to the International Space Station on the CRS, or Commercial Resupply Services 30 mission. That cargo run was notable since it was the first time that a second-generation Dragon spacecraft launched to orbit off of Pad 40. Launches 7 and 8 were both Starlink flights, Starlink 6-52 on April 18th and Starlink 6-62 on May 23rd. That was followed up by the Astra 1P/SES-24 mission on June 20th. This geostationary Earth orbiting satellite designed to help bolster broadcasting capabilities in Europe. Another flight to the ISS on tap of this booster after that. The launch of Northrop Grumman's Cygnus spacecraft on the NG-21 flight, part of its Commercial Resupply Services 2, or CRS-2 contract with NASA. That mission also lifting off from Pad 40 back on August 4th of 2024. Most recent flights were also Starlink missions. Starlink 10-10 on October 15th, and most recently Starlink 6-69 lifting off back on November 11th. Again, this booster looking to make a SpaceX turnaround record today, beating the previous booster turnaround by about a week. Currently T-minus 21 minutes, 26 seconds and counting. Less than a minute now from the chill down of the feed lines. As we head towards that big event. While we're tracking that milestone, I want to thank Reggie Grenier, also known as Reggie 450, joining us with channel membership at the pad leader level. Appreciate that, Reggie. Welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Feedline chills now underway. We're going to be watching for the start of the big vent here. About 10 seconds. And there's the start of the big vent. And with this big vent underway, it will continue on until about T-minus 16 minutes and 30 seconds. Again, setting up for a second stage liquid oxygen load at T-minus 16 minutes. Now T-minus 16 minutes, 19 seconds and counting. The big vent has wrapped up and we're proceeding towards second stage liquid oxygen load. Now T-minus 14 minutes, 26 seconds and counting. I want to thank the more than 4,000 of you who are watching with us live this morning. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us. Allows more folks to find their way into this coverage as we continue on with the final 14 minutes of the count. Also want to thank a few individuals here in our live chat. Want to thank both Patty Chichil and Skate Letter for gifting Spaceflight Now membership each. Appreciate that from the two of you, and to our newest two channel members via gifting, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Also want to thank or welcome Skate Letter in their own right, joining with their own channel membership at the pad leader level, and then turning right around and gifting one. Appreciate that sense of generosity and passing it forward. It's always terrific to see our channel member community grow organically in that way. Now T-minus 12 minutes, 33 seconds and counting. As SpaceX continues to press towards a liftoff at 5:02 a.m. Eastern, 10:02 UTC. Let's go ahead and talk about the launch timeline, the sequence of events as we are expecting them in a nominal flight scenario. Again, liftoff is currently set for 5:02 a.m. Eastern, 10:02 UTC. Falcon 9 will pass through max Q with a point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle about 1 minute and 11 seconds after liftoff. Then there will be a sequence of a few events in fairly rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, at about 2 minutes and 26 seconds post liftoff. Stage separation a few seconds after that, and then the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite for the start of its first burn. The payload fairings will be jettisoned a little bit after the 3-minute mark. T plus 6 minutes and 2 seconds will be the first stage entry burn, slowing down the vehicle in preparation for its landing. This burn lasting about 25 seconds in total. That landing burn will begin in about T plus 7 minutes and 49 seconds, with a touchdown of the drone ship anticipated about T plus 8 minutes and 11 seconds post liftoff. That'll be followed by the conclusion of the Merlin vacuum engines burn, T plus 8 minutes and 40 seconds. It will then go into a coast phase, continue on in that parking orbit until there's a brief 2-second burn at about T plus 54 minutes and 10 seconds to help circularize the orbit, allowing for the Starlink satellites to be deployed at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 19 seconds. SpaceX no longer broadcasting full Starlink missions will get confirmation of deployment via social media. Now T minus 10 minutes and counting. Now T minus 7 minutes, 51 seconds and counting. I want to once again voice our appreciation for Chuck and Jen Briggs for helping to track the rocket today. Taking a look at their camera view right now, as well as our friend Pete Carson's with Max Q Productions, whose moon views you were seeing a little bit earlier on in the broadcast. Now T minus 6 minutes, 57 seconds and counting. The chill down of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket is now underway. Now T-minus 6 minutes and counting. At this point, the first stage kerosene tank should be topped off. Now T-minus 4 minutes, 14 seconds and counting. Strong back retract sequence is now getting underway. Taking a look at the pad view here from SpaceX out there at Space Launch Complex 40. You can see those clamp arms underneath the payload fairings are opening up. And soon the transporter erector, or the strong back, will recline away from the Falcon 9 rocket. Just a bit of housekeeping here. You'll notice that the countdown clock in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, a little bit ahead of what you're seeing from the big box there from SpaceX. Reason being, our countdown clock is in real time. We are seeing from SpaceX is coming in on a slight delay. So as long as we have tracking views available from our cameras of the Falcon 9 rocket, we'll be making our callouts in real time until we pivot to the onboard camera views exclusively. Coming up on T-minus 3 minutes and the conclusion of first stage liquid oxygen load.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
Good call from SpaceX. We're now just awaiting the loading of liquid oxygen on board the second stage to wrap up, and this Falcon 9 will be ready to go from a fueling standpoint. Less than 2 minutes. Again, this Falcon 9 rocket will be flying in a
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
southeasterly trajectory once it leaves the pad heading towards the Caribbean. With that call from SpaceX, the Falcon 9 is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. What you're seeing here are the ground gas closeouts.
Gas launch closeouts has started.
Good call from SpaceX on that as they're removing any remaining liquid oxygen from the feed lines. Approaching a minute out to liftoff, we'll be hearing a call that the Falcon 9 is in startup momentarily.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Good call from SpaceX. We are now just awaiting the SpaceX launch director to give their go for launch. It will be good to go.
SpaceX launch director, go for launch.
And with that, we are now just about 30 seconds away from our first scheduled Falcon 9 launch of the day. Falcon 9 supporting Starlink 12-1. Seven, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on Starlink 12-1. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. Falcon 9 up passing through max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. We're coming up on a few events in fairly rapid succession here. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff for MECO, about T plus 2 minutes 26 seconds. That'll be followed by stage separation, Merlin engine ignition at about 2:37, and then fairing deployment a little bit after the 3-minute mark. Just heard the call that they're thermally conditioning that Merlin ahead of its ignition. Now more than 2 minutes into flight. And a nice shot of the Falcon 9 passing the moon from our tracking camera. Coming up on MECO. MECO. Stage separation. And there you see those events from the SpaceX onboard tracking camera. Those hypersonic grid fins now deploying on the Falcon 9's first stage. Seeing some views of the Florida coastline just on the upper part of the big box, and there go the fairings. Same thing from the onboard camera view. And those Starlink satellites now exposed to the vacuum of space for the first time on this mission. Now a little close to 4 minutes into this flight. The next milestone that we're looking for is the first stage entry burn to begin. That should be coming up at about T plus 6 minutes and 2 seconds, lasting about 25 seconds in total. So far, a nominal flight of this Falcon 9 rocket. A little more than 4.5 minutes into the mission. Now about 5 minutes into flight, we're less than a minute away from the start of the first stage entry burn. Seeing what appears to be the glimpses of the sunrise just over the horizon of the Earth from the booster's perspective, those onboard camera views. Coming up on the start of the first stage entry burn here in just a few seconds. And a good shot of that entry burn there. Well done by our tracking cameras. This burn now wrapping up. In real time, still seeing that burn continue on the second stage, or excuse me, on the first stage from the onboard. Conclusion of that first stage entry burn. Now we're looking towards the landing burn using just one of the Merlins. Flight termination system on the Falcon 9's second stage has been safed. No longer needed at this stage in flight. That landing burn should begin at about T plus 7 minutes and 49 seconds. And again, we're now going to be looking towards the clock at the base of your screen as far as
Stage 1 transonic.
getting visuals on that. Falcon 9 first stage now traveling below the speed of sound as it targets the SpaceX drone ship just read the instructions waiting out in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Less than 10 seconds to the start of the landing burn.
Stage 1 landing burn. Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And for a 13th time, booster B-1080 is safely down on the drone ship.
MFAC shutdown.
And with the conclusion of the second stage's first burn, that upper stage will go into a parking orbit where it will continue on in its coast phase until T plus 54 minutes and 10 seconds. There will be a brief 2-second burn circularizing the orbit, setting up the Starlink satellites to be deployed at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 19 seconds. And with a good liftoff and landing of that first stage booster, let's go ahead and turn now to our mission stats as they currently stand. Again, that booster beat 1080, breaking a SpaceX turnaround record for a booster, heading back to the pad less than 2 weeks after it most recently flew, beating the previous record by about a week. This capping off flight number 13 for B-1080. This also marking the 401st Falcon 9 rocket launch to date. This was SpaceX's 116th Falcon 9 launch with that vehicle of 2024. Also marking the 346th Falcon booster reflight, with the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. When you add in the 2 Falcon Heavies that have also flown this year, this marks the 118th orbital launch for SpaceX of the year. This was their 128th orbital launch within the last 365 days. The 219th orbital launch from Pad 40, and the 274th overall orbital launch from this pad as well. Here's the bar chart version of those numbers as they currently stand as far as the Falcon family of rockets. Again, 118 so far on the year. SpaceX still has well more than a dozen left on the docket. I think about 18 by my count. Moving on to some recovery stats. This was the 99th booster landing successfully on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. That marks the 295th drone ship landing for SpaceX and the 374th overall booster landing. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 83rd orbital launch from the Sunshine State, the 125th orbital launch from U.S. soil, the 137th orbital launch from U.S. Rocket Company. Want to give a tip of the hat to Rocket Lab for a successful launch on behalf of Internet of Things satellite company Kinéis, which their third batch of 5 satellites heading up to orbit just this morning, a couple of hours or a few hours before this launch here. Starlink 12-1 also marked the 222nd, it should be second, it's a typo there, orbital launch from around the world. 6 launch failures on the year so far. Here's where the pie chart currently stands. The U.S. holding 62% of the pie now, China with a solid quarter. Russia, with its 14 launches, holds 6% of the orbital launch pie. And with that, want to thank all those who've helped make today's, the first launch of the day, possible. Our thanks to our wonderful moderators, Callistia Lee and Aussie Space Girl, for hanging out in the live chat, helping to facilitate good conversation there with that. Broad thanks to our wonderful channel member community here on YouTube, without whom these live launch opportunities would not be possible. Thanks to folks like Jeff Buey with a $10 super chat, and all those who tipped with a super chat today. Really appreciate that added level of support. Our thanks as well to Chuck and Jen Briggs for offering some tracking views for us, as well as to our friend Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions. Thanks to photographer Adam Bernstein for his tracking work as well. Looking forward to some of that still photography with the launch liftoff this morning. If you're not already following him, you can find his work as well as our other photographer, Michael Kane, over on their handles at X. Adam is at ABurnNYC. Michael Kane is at MD Kane Jr. While you're there, be sure to follow Spaceflight Now, simply at Spaceflight Now. If you're not on X, you can find us on Threads, Facebook, as well as Blue Sky. Thanks to our Spaceflight Now editor for helping to run the technical operations of the broadcast today. Most importantly, though, out of everyone, big thanks to you for wherever you are watching from, making it all the way to the end here, and we hope to see you back here on the YouTube channel in the very near future. How soon is soon? Well, I'm talking about later on today, as SpaceX, as it currently stands, has one more launch on the docket. hopefully the last one before the Thanksgiving holiday for all of us here in the United States. Looking at Starlink 6-76, lifting off with a window that opens at 10:31 p.m. Eastern. 10:31 tonight here on the East Coast. That is 03:31 UTC for our friends joining around the world. When that rocket does launch, it will lift off from this pad you see here on your screen. Taking a live look right now out to Historic Launch Complex 39A. And that's where Starlink 6-76 will lift off from. Rocket not at the pad yet, though, so be sure to stay tuned to our 24-hour live pad view channel over at Launchpad Live, where you can watch the rollout of this Falcon 9 rocket when it does happen a little later on this morning or later today in support of that launch. Once again, big thanks to the team. Big ups to you for hanging with us throughout the course of this live launch coverage. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.